All set.
Okay, I'll call the meeting of the Oregon School District Board of Education to order on Monday, April 9th, 2018. We are at the Oregon High School Innovation Center. Ms. Wick, would you call the roll?
Ms. Feeney? Present. Ms. Oderico? Here. Ms. Flanagan? Here. Mr. Raymond? Here. Mr. Kraus?
Yo.
Mr. LeBrun?
Here.
Mr. Zock?
Present, the board has a quorum. I have proof that the meeting has been appropriately noticed under Wisconsin Open Meetings Law, and that proof will be with Ms. Wick if anyone wants to inspect that. Our agenda, as noticed, includes an action item from Policy Committee on course options. For discussion items, we're going to be working on the 18-19 staffing plan. We'll get that report from the administration tonight with the opportunity to ask questions, and that will be considered for action on the next board meeting, and then we'll continue and have another work session on student growth, population and growth report. So that's our agenda this evening. I need a motion to approve the agenda. Okay, Mr. LeBrun with a second. Mr. Raymond? Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. We have an agenda for the evening. Under the agenda, item A is consent calendar. Is there any item that any board member wishes to remove from the consent calendar? Okay, I'll need a motion to approve the items on the consent calendar then. Mr. Raymond?
Second.
Mr. Kraus, second. I see a trend. I'll note that we have a number of donations, one from Brooke Panitz in the amount of $525 for the Brooklyn Green and Healthy Hoop House. Amy Verheyden, $100 for OMS PBIS. Brooklyn PTO, as part of their fundraising effort, I'm assuming just over $45,000 for the playground equipment. So that's an amazing contribution from the PTO. And then the Oregon Choral Boosters have contributed just short of $500 for transportation for choir trips. So we thank all those folks for their generous donations to the district. We also have 3 retirements. I thought we had a ban on retirements after a while. Okay, Mary, you didn't obviously get that message. We're not going to let you retire. Okay. Mary's going to retire.
She'll be working for a couple more years.
Yeah, Mary's retiring after 30 years in education and 27 years here, and just we're going to miss you. Wish we could have talked you out of it, but we totally understand. And then Missy Sampson's retiring as one of our school nurses after being here for, I think, 12 years. Yep. And then Mary Kay Gillespie's been here for 31 years, and she's at, I think, one of our elementary schools in Brooklyn in 2nd grade. So amazing longevity. We're going to miss them greatly. So those retirements are on our consent calendar. So we have a motion and a second, right, Janie? Yes. Could you take the roll?
Mr. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Kraus?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Ms. Feeney? Yes. Ms. Oderico? Yes. Ms. Flanagan? Yes. Mr. Zock?
Yes. Items on the consent calendar are carried by a 7-0 vote. Agenda item B is communications from the public. Board Policy 18004 establishes the opportunity for members of the public to address the board. Is there any member of the public who wishes to address the board? I don't see any, and Ms. Wick, no one's notified you. Okay, we'll move on then to item C, informations items. Anyone from the OEA? I didn't see anyone here tonight. Nope, no one's here. Student report. Hi, Ellen.
All right, so it's our 2nd week back from spring break, so lots of tests. Fine Arts Week is this week, so it's where students are able to showcase their talents. It's one of our favorite weeks of the year. We get to miss class to go see some awesome performances, including like a Leap Above dance recital, solo and ensemble performances, and usually our favorite performance of the week is a staff performance, which is Friday, 9th hour. Also this week on, I believe, Thursday, there is the OHS art show and silent auction. Spring sports are in full motion. There's upcoming games, meets, matches. I know there's a soccer game tonight far away, like an hour or so. And this Saturday, April 14th, is the annual Character Pancake Breakfast. It's run by Student Council. So if you guys, I brought a few flyers. If anybody is interested in dressing up like their favorite princess, superhero, or any other character, let me know.
Mr. Raymond, that you're still officially on the board, so you can. Yeah. We'll have to let you know what superhero you want to pose as. Okay.
No, we're all good.
This is our night to make fun of Jeff. Right.
Well, that's all good because I'm done. So that's all.
Thank you very much. Action items D, policy 341 course options. Krista, the floor is yours.
Okay, you may recall we discussed this a little bit at the last meeting, but the policy has come forth with a recommendation to approve this, and I think you see in front of you the highlighted areas of discussion. So again, this is a new policy based on some changes to state statute, and this is for students who want to enroll in a UW system institution, a tribally controlled college, or a private nonprofit institution of higher education. So there's a different policy that's for technical colleges. So again, some highlights: the board appoints the district superintendent or their designee as our agent to make decisions regarding this program, but we still do have the right for people to appeal those decisions or any denials to us. And then the back just talks about the reimbursement program that is associated with students that want to take these courses. So again, policy is making a recommendation for the approval of this policy.
And this was, we deleted the corresponding policy at the last meeting, and so we need to replace it with this by state law. So policies moved, who doesn't need a second. Does anybody have any questions for the policy committee? Seeing none, Ms. Wick, would you call the roll?
Ms. Flanagan? Yes. Mr. Raymond? Mr. Kraus?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Ms. Feeney? Yes. Ms. Oderico? Yes. Mr. Zak?
Yes, policy is adopted by 7-0 vote. Thanks, Krista. Thank you, Gina, for bringing that forward. Next item on the agenda E is discussion items under E, committee reports policy. Visioning, Jeff?
We did not meet in March, but we will be meeting next Wednesday, the 18th at 7:30 in the morning.
That will be your last official act as a board member, absent any special meeting, yes. So it smiles so much. Anyway, next item is 2018-2019 staffing plan. This is in conjunction with our budget work as well. The way I'd like to approach this is have Dr. Bussler and the administration formally present the staffing plan to the board. At that point, I'm going to have 3 different phases for board interaction. One would be, do you have any questions, specific questions? 2, do we need any further information? And 3, then your reaction, pro or con, or any strong objection, that sort of stuff. So we'll go questions, information, kind of discussion in terms of how we present. Everybody okay with that way of proceeding? Okay, Dr. Bussler, the floor is yours to present the staffing plan.
A number of us will present the staffing plan this evening, and I'm certain you cannot miss the color. So this is hot off the presses. We made a few changes this afternoon. So if you're referring to an electronic one, Janie has made an update to the board packet. If you're looking for the paper one, it is this bright yellow. And I have just a couple of comments to get started, and then Gina and Andy are going to make some comments as well and walk you through some of the specifics. You've heard this before, and like most years, seldom do we have enough funding to address every request that we have. But remember, this is our first draft, and we balance the needed positions with the available funds. One thing we started last year, and the feedback from all of you was favorable, so we did it again this year. You'll notice in our priorities, we tried to provide a heading for you. And one of our first headings is legally required. Another heading is class size guidelines. And then watch list items, things that we ranked as a priority, but items that we may or may not be able to fit in our current estimate. And then we have second priorities and third priorities. when we look at all of the funding requests, we have enough funds for approximately 1/3 of the request. So that means 2/3 of items, positions that were requested, we do not have the funds for. Additionally, on Table 4, this is our first draft of leading educator positions. This is something new for us. This was part or year 3 of the teacher and educator compensation plan that was approved in November of 2016. We have listed 5 different position areas. Again, we're at the very beginning part of this, but our thinking has been these positions could run a variety of time frames from a semester to a year, and then possibly renewable for more than a year. We are also thinking of these positions as being not necessarily all of them being full-time, so it's part-time. It's a portion of a contract. I would say we did a great deal of synthesis to get all of this on one page, and I'm not sure that we're going to be able to clearly articulate every thought that went into what seems like almost a dozen meetings talking about the leading educator positions. Again, this is new territory for us, something we haven't had the opportunity to do before, so we can walk through as much detail as you would like, and we welcome your questions and reaction. The other thing that I'll say is we try to balance out in terms of the first area of priorities. That's permanent funding that we have that's ongoing. So based on what's approved, you'll notice there are not double requests for the most part in what's on Table 3 versus what's on Table 4. But we will walk through those details when we get to it. And I'm forgetting, I think I'm going to turn it to Andy first so he can give you a big picture on table number 1, which should be page 3. And we just made some updates to this today.
And Andy, before you go, Troy won by a landslide in his election. So you're going to be voting on this next time. So if you feel comfortable coming up here and joining in the discussion, does anybody have any objection to that? Okay. Come on up and join us at the table. Thanks. Andy?
You bet. So as Dr. Bustle just said, this is big picture, so very, very high level, just to kind of give people a feel for what kind of money we're going to be talking about, and then some of those significant expenditures that we obviously anticipate as we go through the budgeting process. So just kind of talking you through it, the revenue cap, revenue limitation formula. We don't get additional funds for each student this year. This is just the 3-year averaging that's happening. That basically the 3 last September, or well, the current upcoming September 3rd Friday count in 2018, but then the last prior to September 3rd Friday counts, you average those together, and just because we've been growing, there's about $663,000 of additional revenue authority that we'll be having this next year. Then we have our per pupil aid. That's a categorical reimbursement that comes directly from the state of Wisconsin. That's $817,000 or $204 per student for all of our students. But then there's also the additional 61 that's in the revenue cap. So that totals at $817,000. Open enrollment, we do have a little bit anticipated increase in open enrollment in dollars. Part of that is because of the increased dollar amount per student that we get, because that was built into the state budget, that we will get a little bit more per student. But also we do anticipate about 16 more net increase in students. So that's what gets you the $120,000 for a grand total of about $1.6 million, which is a fairly significant number that we haven't seen that type of revenue increase in the past. A good portion of it coming from the state of Wisconsin, but some also coming from our local taxpayers. This table 2 on the next page talks about those significant expenditures that we're trying to identify. Obviously, the 3rd year and final year of the implementation of the educator compensation plan. So not final year, but it's the 3rd year of implementation. It's fully implemented after this next year. We anticipate that costing about $600,000. Staff increases for those groups that aren't within the compensation plan, but based on a CPI number, just a budgeting number that we're using at this point is $270,000. And then our health insurance, this is the number that changed if you were looking over the weekend. On Thursday or Friday this last week, we confirmed with our health insurance consultant that we were able to get our 5.5% increase, which was our 3-year contract with Unity Health Insurance. We were able to negotiate that down to 3.95%. We have had some pretty good experience over the last year, and so in talking with them, we are also looking to lock up a multi-year contract with them. We haven't nailed down all the details of that, but the 3.95 for next year is a valid assumption at this point in time. So that totals about $1,070,000. So just some quick math for those significant revenues, those significant expenditures, leaves us with about $530,000 of dollars to allocate to additional expenditures. With that, I think I'm turning it over to Ms. Jones.
And I asked Dr. Bergstrom to join me, but I think I'll stop there to see if anyone has questions on the big picture budget. Okay.
Well, I do, but I'm going to hold.
Oh, okay.
So I want to get through the, go
All
ahead.
right. So I will jump into table 3 then, and I do want to emphasize something that Dr. Bussler said, is that we have spent a lot of time as a team talking about this, and this is our recommendation to you, but our feedback today is your feedback today is very important, and the goal of today is really to explain to you our recommendation, and then come to you with a final at the next board meeting. So when we talked about as a team, we first looked at, if you look at our priorities, what is legally required? What do we have to do? And we do have a 4K class that has some students with some significant needs, and that we anticipate their IEPs will require one-on-one support. So we will need to add special education paraprofessionals. So we estimate 3.5 FTE. I know that Ms. Weidenstein is looking at that, but assuming that those 4K students come to us in kindergarten, we anticipate they will need one-on-one support. So that's something we are required to provide. So you'll see that first. Also, with the increase in children that have special needs, our OT caseloads have been increasing every year. We've been slowly trying to add a little bit, but we know that their IEPs will require additional OT needs, and so we're asking for a 0.4 increase for that. So those are things that we will need to provide. Then we go to the board priority, at least traditionally since I have been here, class size has been a priority for the board. So when looking at our numbers, one of the things, and I'll ask Dr. Bergson to talk about this a little bit, we had a DPI consultant come in and look at our ESL, ELL program. And one of the things that was required and warranted by DPI recommendation is to add an ESL teacher at the high school so that we can take the teacher who's working in that area and have her refocus at the lower grade levels. Also, we looked at middle school. We have a number of students who have 2 study halls in their day because they're not interested in teaching music, and we have the wonderful STEAM space. So in order to offer kids that opportunity, we would like to add a STEAM teacher at the middle school. We'd also like to offer AP Computer Science and Math. Physical education and mindfulness at Brooklyn. This is a pilot that Netherwood did this year because we've added sections to meet our class size requirement. With our rotations, we need to add another section at Netherwood. And Brooklyn will be in that same position for this year. So in order to give the children at Brooklyn the same opportunity as the children at Netherwood, we would like to add a physical education and mindfulness teacher. Also in terms of helping kids who are dealing with challenges, we found that teaching mindfulness has been a wonderful strategy to help cope with stress and self-regulation. And then similarly at RCI, it becomes a scheduling issue with the rotations and adding a section at RCI because of our class sizes. So we're also asking to add a 0.5 STEAM teacher at RCI as well. And then on our watch list, you'll see we have watch list first grade for Brooklyn. We need to look at our class size numbers. So as we did last year, we will be asking the board to approve that. And then if our class size is warranted, then we would likely post that at the end of June. And then we have mental health. also on the watch list. We know that our students continue to have needs in this area. You'll see in our second priority, that's a more detailed list of what we feel we need. But we would like to look at, there's some available grant funding for social workers that may be available, so we would like to take a look at that. And then if we're able to add that, then look at that time really what our needs warrant in terms of where we might add additional staffing in mental health. So you'll see that everything on our first priority, including our watch list, is $595,000. So I assume I'll get the question, well, isn't that over the $530,000 that you are estimating you will have? And what I would say is a few things to that. First of all, these numbers are estimates. It really depends on the experience level of the person that we hire and also the benefits that they select. So for me, I just assume that if the position is benefit eligible, that they select the family plan, but I also know that not all of our staff members do take our insurance or may take a single plan. So that gives me some flexibility in the numbers. Also, the experience level of the person hired gives us flexibility as well. I try to take about an average. But usually, we tend to budget on the conservative side, so that because I don't want to not have money to pay people, right? And then also we're really hopeful that for our AP computer science need, that we may have a teacher internally that is interested in pursuing that certification that would like to teach it. So if we do that, we're hoping we can reallocate some of his classes, and then that would free up that money to go towards another position. And I will look to see what Dr. Bergstrom would like to add.
I just want to add that we asked a CISA consultant to come in and evaluate our English language learner program. So it wasn't someone from DPI, but it was a CISA consultant. And her report had several recommendations. And she did say that she very rarely recommends additional people because she doesn't think that's usually the route to improved programming. However, she felt like we were running our program a little thin with our FTE, and that in order to do what we wanted to be able to do for our students, she recommended we add at least one position.
So that's the ESL teacher was one of the first priorities.
Correct.
So that goes through our first priority in Table 3. Then you'll also see, then we have a second priority, which we categorized as mental health needs, and then DPI caseload guidelines, and then we went into program improvements. And you can see the estimates of the budget impact for those as well. So what questions do you have for me, if any, on Table 3?
We'll wait.
Or do you want me to just keep going?
Keep going and then
All right.
we'll come back.
All right, then moving on to Table 4, this is our leading educator recommendation, and we are still thinking about this. We were even talking about it in our meeting this afternoon, and we really feel that this goes together with the staffing recommendation. So if the board has feedback for us that changes our recommendation, I think it'll change our thinking on the leading educators as well. But as a team, we prioritized, and to reiterate what Dr. Bustler said, is we reserved 5.0 FTE in the budget under the educator compensation plan for these positions, but it doesn't have to mean that they're 5 full-time positions. And so I can talk about that in a little while. Our highest priority as a team was some type of behavior specialist, and you can see our rationale there. But essentially, we know that our students have some challenging behaviors choices, and so we would like someone that would really help us increase our internal capacity to address those issues. And I think you'll really see that theme as we go through. Is one theme that came out of the teacher compensation committee is that teachers said we want an opportunity to be leaders, but not necessarily be administrators. And so what I think we found through our coaching model is that where we're the most successful is if we really have someone who's an expert in an area help increase our staff's internal capacity to address issues and to improve their practice. So the second priority was English as a second language coordinator. We know that when we look at our data that we have gaps for our English language learner, and in light of our CISA report and what our data is telling us, that we know that we need someone to be a coordinator in this area. Third we have on the list is a literacy coordinator and a math coordinator, unlikely to be the same person. So this might be a split position. Is someone that can really help us look at our curriculum for K through senior year of high school and have the curriculum on a continuum in a way that really integrates various subjects. And I'll let Dr. Bergsman talk about that in a moment. Then we have professional development coordinator. And, that was really the cornerstone of our educator compensation plan, was to have meaningful and intensive professional development that was meant to increase student achievement. So our thinking is perhaps this is a coordinator position, or maybe it becomes part of the other positions, but we know that we need someone that's really helping teachers select the appropriate professional development, helping educators develop pathways, reviewing the data, making sure that our professional development is effective. And then lastly, we have a Tier 1 support through instructional coaching. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bergsman to talk a little bit more about that.
We just feel like we've really been able to make an impact on classroom instruction through the coaching model that we have in the district. And the people who have been hired over the last several years as coaches have been really instrumental in moving all of us forward in our practices. And I think that that is a model that we can continue to lean on as far as how we're going to really impact students and their learning. Consequently, that's why it's included in the leading educator piece, is because we know that we're getting results with it based on the fact that in a coaching cycles, teachers are setting goals based on where they want their students to be, and then those goals are measured in their work with the coach, and the cycles are effective. And it's an experience that we want more of our teachers to be able to have in teams and as individuals.
So in essence, and you'll see that on the summary and recommendation part, that there's so many opportunities with growing, but there's challenges as well, and we know that. And I think you can really see this in the staffing report, that as we grow, we want to continue to offer the educational opportunities that we have traditionally in the past. And so we're really trying to balance that need within the budget framework that we have. So our recommendation would be next week to approve us filling the positions that were at least in the, 2 weeks, in the first priority, and then also the leading educator positions. And then if additional funding becomes available, then we would move into the second priority.
Dr. Bussler, does that complete the presentation? Dr. Bergstrom, Gina, Leslie?
Yes, we will entertain your questions, comments, reactions to our plan.
I think I'm going to, individually go through questions at this point and then information second, but going through each board member. Barb, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, so I'm just looking at table 4. I want to make sure I understand this. These are people who have some teaching responsibilities.
They may, or it depends on the FTE of the position.
Okay, but the funding for that, is that covered under the educator compensation line on table 2?
It is.
Okay.
Any more questions, Barb? Tim?
With regards to the coaching that has been done in the past that has shown to be get great results, it sounds like. Can you tell me how long of a period of time has that taken place over?
Well, we've had reading coaches for, I'd say, probably 8 years or so. And originally they were very focused on implementing the workshop model within the classroom. So they were a big part of us adopting our current curriculum and learning how to utilize it effectively. And then recently we've added instructional coaches, or our middle school reading coach is now an instructional coach, meaning she works with all subject areas to improve instructional practice. And then Andrea Anderson has been our coach here at the high school with a very different focus from previous years for 3 years now. and this is the second year of math coaches. So, and over that time, we have been changing our model for coaching. We now have a menu of services that are specific to what we are trying to accomplish. And so while our goal is to be able to utilize student-centered coaching for the majority of the time, and that's where we're able to measure specific results, we also know that it's important to meet the teacher where the teacher is at and to offer the service that helps take that teacher to his or her next level, wherever that may be. And I also have to say that coaches have been a really important part of the CCVs, and at the high school, CCVs and instructional rounds. Andrea has been a significant leader in that area. So they're playing multiple roles related to improving instruction.
Do you anticipate, assuming that you continue to see the positive outcomes, do you anticipate adding more coaches over the next several years, or only as we add to the district-wide employee base?
At the very least, I'd like to be able to match our ratio as we continue to grow. But hopefully we can utilize the leading educator positions to increase teachers' access to a coaching by decreasing the ratio of coach to teacher.
Krista?
Sorry, my questions are kind of all over the board, but I'll just start. Since we're on the leading educator positions, as we look at these, I assume that a lot of these positions are currently being assumed by someone. So it would be interesting to know if these positions create capacity for you, Leslie, or for some other staff people, and I think that would be helpful in decision making too, that as we add these, whose plate does it help clear a little bit, which could then give us other things that can move us forward. I guess my other question is, who do you see these positions reporting to? And my question is geared toward, does it help us create a cross district instead of here's a building, here's a building, here's a building?
Superb questions. I see the majority of these positions, if not all of them, probably reporting to me. So a lot of them currently, I sort of have my fingers in. The ESL coordinator, it's currently a 0.2 of a teacher's contract. And what we discovered through the CISA report is that probably wasn't enough. It may be enough for where we were 10 years ago, but it's not enough for where we want to be. And consequently, we want to be able to increase that FTE. The math and literacy coordinator, it sort of goes hand in hand with professional development. There are things that we want to be able to get done. And right now, our coaches spend quite a bit of time on curricular issues in addition to coaching. And if we were able to tease that out a little bit and say, this person is the go-to for the curriculum and you're 100% coach, I think we might be able to get some more results with that too. And I would also say that the professional development component has been wonderful to add to who we are as a district and what we offer our staff. But I would say it has changed, the pie chart of how I spend my time. So there are multiple solutions to that, and one of the solutions could be to have somebody who does some of that coordination, but it could also be to have some people who are doing other types of curriculum work, and I do more of that coordination. I mean, either or, we'd have to figure out what the balance would be.
And then do we see these positions having assigned goals in terms of something that we would see, here's how we know if this is successful, or here's how we know that position is done and we can move on to something else? I'm envisioning metrics for all of the positions so they know exactly what it is we wanted to accomplish with that FTE. Otherwise, just adding another body doesn't really help us. Then my other question is, and maybe I missed it in here, but associated with the ESL, it seems like DPI has come with some guidelines, and I'm wondering if there's another sort of resource in terms of mental health out there that tells us this is what the school district of this size, or this is what we're seeing in terms of caseload of what we should have for mental health, that would be kind of a resource or a research guideline for our district. And I don't know if that's in here and I missed it, or which would just give me a better sense of, we're way behind, or here's where we should be, or...
Professional organizations always have recommendations for ratios, sort of counselors to students, of school psychologists to students, et cetera. So we've had an eye on that for several years because we've always been at the upper end of where professional organizations think we should be. As far as a DPI recommendation on mental health services, I know they do have some frameworks out there that we could be using, and we have been consulting as part of the task force, and I think those resources are things that we've been utilizing when we've made requests in the past, such as when we asked for an additional .2 counselor at the middle level to do a depression screener. So those are the things that we are consulting currently. I don't know how far off we are from where, I don't know how far we are off regarding our school counselor and school psychologist ratios or social worker ratios. I don't have those numbers in my head right now.
Then I guess my final question is, and I don't know if this is possible, but we're kind of looking at a snapshot of what we're adding, and is it possible to see what we have? So I know what we want to add, but it's hard for me to kind of make a decision when I don't know what we currently have.
Got it. So a chart that sort of lists that out for you.
Or if there's even expense reductions, meaning there are classes that are not being requested at the high school anymore, for example, which I think we saw last year in terms of maybe there aren't, but are there areas that you've looked at that maybe it's an expense reduction based on trends? I don't know if that's possible, so I'm just kind of throwing that out there.
So we absolutely have a lot of data. Can you help me a little bit know how much detail you're looking for?
Gina, I'm going to just interject for a second. Krista's question leads me to believe that I did not share the document that you put together for me that shows a chart with all of our staffing positions. So I'll include that in this week's update to the board. And Gina's been working on, we have lots of different gradations of that. So we'll start with the largest chart that looks across the district. She also has it broken down into, it's by school. So it would give you a sense on one sheet of paper all of our staffing positions.
Just the big picture. So here's who we are.
And just remember, it's me that forgot that chart. It is not Gina. She had it done a couple of weeks ago.
With Erica's help. But if that isn't what you need, just email me and I'll make sure that I get you what you need.
My question is sort of specific to the first priority list on table 3, which is about the STEAM edition. I know we currently have STEAM curriculum because we built the rooms at the OMS. Do we have a physical space where STEAM happens at RCI? And are we expanding a STEAM curriculum, or are we just kind of filling something because we have kids that are in study hall and don't have other options, and is this the best option for them? So that's kind of long with.
Well, for the middle school, Jason might want to talk a little bit about the RCI edition for STEAM, but for the middle school, it was a part of the, we had a scheduling consultant come in last year to look at the middle school schedule and to look at how we were allocating our teacher time. And the scheduling consultant said that the fact that there were students in 2 study halls, we needed to find a solution to that problem. So Shannon went back and looked at the data. Who are students in 2 study halls? What are they interested in? And they're often students who have a high preference for hands-on learning. And so that's one of the reasons that for that particular piece, STEAM was chosen as a possible elective, because A, we have the space, and B, there are students in the 2 study halls that would really benefit from that because they are learners who would love that opportunity. Now, as far as the RCI edition, I don't have as much background information on that. So, Jason?
I can talk a little bit if you want to talk about the space issue. When we were talking about that, one of the things that Amy Miller and I have talked about is we have Camp Invention, which used to be a non-summer school class, was a summer school class last year, and now will be a summer school class, we hope. And so, we have 200 kids that come in the summer and voluntarily take what's essentially STEAM curriculum, and they love it, right? And so then in thinking with careers for the 21st century, and building on that, and then I think the sooner that we can introduce that curriculum, the more valuable it'll be to our students, particularly if we're adding it at the middle school and then we have it offered at the high school. So it really seemed to be a perfect fit for our 5th and 6th grade learners.
So it'd be kind of an introduction.
Yes, an introduction, and it fills a gap that we have. I believe everyone is familiar with engineering is elementary. At the elementary level with STEAM, we really didn't have anything at RCI. And with the focus that STEAM currently has in our district, the one gap area is at RCI. Now, in a couple of years from now, assuming that the next agenda item we talk about continues to roll out and move forward, there might be a different approach with STEAM for our 5th and 6th graders, because some of those youngsters could be at the middle school, while others would be at an elementary school if we changed our grade configuration.
Did you want to add anything, Jason?
No, as far as spacing, we have the space right now at RCI, because we have a 5th grade classroom that would be, it's been transitioned into a full computer lab to more of a maker space computer lab. So that would be one specific location, at least for the next year or two, that we would be able to use that. And then depending on how sections continue to grow, we would evaluate how we'd infuse that most likely into the team areas.
Regarding the leading educators, I want to say when the compensation plan was first being put together, and this is probably an assumption on my part, I saw leading educators as being full-time for an entire year. And if I understood you guys tonight, I'm hearing it might be part-time, it might be for a part of the year, or maybe just a semester. Can you give us a little information on if things changed from the original view of things? What's the rationale for what might happen here?
So I would say that the time in the compensation committee that we talked about leading educators, that we did talk about that it would perhaps be in addition to someone's teaching duties or a full-time release position, that it would really depend on what the person was teaching and what the need was in the position. So for example, let's say we have someone who wants to be the math coordinator position and also teaches AP calculus. That might be something that fits together really nicely as a position versus someone who's a behavior specialist that may be more of a full-time position. So we always did talk through the compensation committee that would really be dependent upon our needs and have a good fit with what the educator was looking for as well. And I think that what we had talked about was maybe, what we had talked about originally as a committee was a 3-year position. But I think if you step back, that the plan changed pretty significantly from the first committee recommendation to the final plan. So I feel that we are being very true to the model, and that we're not necessarily, that the 3-year isn't set in stone, that it's really what does the district need and what's the time frame that best accomplishes that need.
Thanks. Regarding the Table 4 lead educator positions, I wanted to advocate for, all these are important, and I realize the importance of all these, but I think that an environmental education specialist and coordinator would be something that could be included as one of these 5. It was one of the recommendations of the task force that we use one of the leader educators in this way. And one of the new policies of the board that we passed this year, that the district have an aligned K-12 curriculum that integrates ecological and environmental sciences and issues into the curriculum, including socioeconomic aspects. In a time when much of our government is going the other way, it becomes more and more prevalent, I think, upon those of us who do subscribe to science as something that we need to hew to and to pay attention to push the other way and prepare our students for the coming drama that our society is going to face. And the more prepared they are, and I'm not saying to scare people, but to prepare them to be a part of a solution as much as a solution as we can give, and to be part of pushing for something that is going to lessen the negative impacts of the impending ecological horrors, then I think the better. I hate to say that any of these positions is less needed than the other, but if I were going to suggest, if we are already looking at another full-time ESL teacher, that some of those duties could be in that coordinating function of a new ASL teacher, and perhaps we could put an environmental education specialist whose job would be to coordinate K-12 education, not only in sciences, but also throughout the curriculum. There are experts and people who have done that in schools that focus on that, even in the arts and English, etc. So that's really my only comment on this. I would like to see an environmental education specialist as one of our 5 leading teachers.
And I appreciate that. And I was actually at a conference this week and met someone from Montana, and we were talking about that very issue. So when we were looking at the leading educator positions, that was definitely on our list of things that the team recommended. And so it's something that we are very sensitive to and knew the task force recommendation as well. And so we've worked really hard to embed that throughout our curriculum as well. I mean, this is what we see as the highest needs right now. But we know that that's an important issue, and that's why we have worked very hard to embed it in almost everything that we're doing. You want to?
Well, the new environmental literacy standards there'll be a huge curriculum adoption process starting next year for those. And you're right, they're not just in science. They're in social studies, they're in health, they're throughout all of the curriculum. So we spoke about leading educators and some type of STEAM coordination, because I think the environmental education component fits very well in there too. So that is something we talked about, and it's something that we will continue to revisit in the discussion, because it does play a role, and I think there's some nice possibilities there. But one of the things to think about is a math coordinator might also have something to offer in that area too. So we might be looking for people who have more than one area of talent or expertise.
Anything else? Okay. Troy?
Clarification, Dr. Bergstrom. You mentioned that Oregon is at the upper end of the ratio of industry guidelines for mental health. Mm-hmm. Is that meaning that we have fewer counselors, that ratio is short on counselors or short on?
Within the range, we're just in the higher end of the range, meaning the number of students per counselor, yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. And then my question, I guess, is on table 3, first priority and second priority. We have mental health under the first priority, and then we have a series of mental health needs under the second priority. So could you just explain what the difference between those two would be, and if we did go with the first priority, single position, how that would be facilitated?
So that's a great question. So in looking at our mental health needs in the second priority, we wanted to give you a little more detail as to what we were looking at for specific positions. But we did just have the Dane County Youth Survey come out on mental health needs, so we wanted to be able to take a look at that. And we also wanted to take a look at there could potentially be some grant funding available for a social work position. So we were hoping that between the data from the youth survey, getting a little more detail from DPI on the grant process, and then looking at our watch list, that we could give you a little bit more detail as to what exact position that we would be looking at in our first priority. But wanted to let you know that it's on our watch list and that we know we need to add at least one position in that area. But in terms of if it's a school psychologist, a counselor, or a social worker, we wanted to firm up those two pieces first.
Thank you.
Troy, I'll just add and clarify with the administrators. On the second priority under mental health, everything is listed in alphabetical order.
Thank
It
you.
is not listed in priority order. I would offer to the board, and I think you know this, we are, from my experiences in other school districts and here in Oregon, we are lightest at social work. Until a couple of years ago, we did not have a school social worker. That is not as common as most districts. Now, having said that, I remember a day when we had 3% free and a 3% poverty rate. Districts with a 3% poverty rate probably didn't have a lot of social work allocation. We're now at 20% poverty rate, which again is high for us, low on a statewide basis. If there's an area that we're clearly out of whack with, it's social work. I'm not advocating for social work over counselors, over school psychs, because sometimes we can find counselors that have a social work background, and it's a huge benefit, or a social worker that has a counselor background. That is an area that we've looked at. I think many of you are familiar. We have the Dane County grant with Joe Parisi, and I'm forgetting exactly building bridges. And Candace, how many FTE do we have? We have 2 FTE social workers, which was brand new for this year. And our current social work allocation was less than about 0.5. So we went from 0 to 0.5 in the last 3 years to 2.5. So that's been an important investment for us, and that's why we just left it broad in the first priority, because administratively we have to sit around the big table or sit in the circle and figure out where is the best return on mental health needs in the district.
Nope, that's all.
Okay, I'm going to kind of combine mine with what we need and then questions, and then we'll go back if there's anything you guys need in terms of further information. I'll echo Krista's comment that I'd like to see the overall picture to see where we're at in staffing us some of these areas. I mean, I've indicated over the years we just keep adding little bits and pieces, and I just don't have a real good idea of what the overall staffing level looks in that. And along those lines, if we could get that ESL report so we could see that, and then also the data on where we're at with respect to social workers and mental health professionals in the ranges there, just so we have that. I'd like to see it at least. In terms of the first priority, Table 3 information, the special ed paraprofessionals, I understand that this is driven strictly by individuals we've identified in 4K that are going to be enrolled in our district in K, so they'll need to have one-on-one or some assisted care. How many do we have now, just out of curiosity,
How many,
of paraprofessionals that we have dedicated?
in which level?
In like kindergarten? I mean, has this been an issue before? I mean, that's a big jump.
It is a big jump.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen that before, which is why it struck me as.
I have
Just-
it by school. I don't know that I would have to check quickly to look at it by kindergarten.
Yeah, and that's more of a curiosity question than I'm not sure about it question. It's just seeing a 3.5 need when we haven't seen that before. Is there a reason for that? It's just nature of the census, or? Oh. Yeah, I mean, are we seeing parents moving into the area because we have these services available?
Well, we like to say that, yes, we have a
Yeah.
superior special education
Yeah.
program, so
I
they
was
choose
gonna
us. Yeah, absolutely.
And here's the rhetorical question: does this get funded through the federal government at all? Through no,
So
right? Okay.
we do have grant funding, but it's not sufficient.
Okay.
Oh, Mary would like to say something.
Yeah. Sure, I got it. Yep. So on the ESL teacher at the high school, we're going to make that a full-time position? Could we get the numbers that would serve?
Certainly.
Okay. And what that involves, and then, yeah. I can't read my own writing. Do we have STEAM curriculum at the middle school now? So what's different?
Shannon, you're welcome to answer this too, but yeah, absolutely. The interdisciplinary approach is alive and well at the middle school. And we would say that we have quite a few STEAM things happening related to science and health and science and technology. This would be an addition to what we already have incorporated into it.
Just be a different course?
That's correct. It'd be an elective
How would
for
it be
students to
different than
take.
what we're doing?
It would be more. It would be deeper. It would be other. And I think we might even be able to think about some coding components to it also as a part of STEAM.
Would we then mandate that students have no more than one study hall? If that's why we're doing this?
I look back to Shannon, yes.
Okay. STEAM also includes the arts. How is
Correct.
that incorporated into this? And if they're not taking arts, how does that impact us?
Or if they are, if they're into music, they can't take STEAM. If they're band orchestra, they can't take STEAM right now.
Well, students will have to make some choices. But thankfully, we do have a certain level of the STEAM integrated throughout the school, so that's a good thing. But we still have to create the curriculum for this class. And so how we integrate art into it, I think that's kind of an exciting piece to it.
What are the conflicts going to be in terms of choosing between language and arts and STEAM?
I can answer that. It's different for 7th and 8th grade. So one thing that we found when we worked with the consultant, and developmentally, 8th graders want more autonomy and they want more choices in their schedule. So for 7th grade, they basically have what would be like a period and a half of choice. So a student could take 3 musics. They could take 2 musics in a study hall. They could take STEAM and 1 music. So there's still flexibility. At 8th grade, we shifted some things around so that they have 2.5 periods of choice. So an 8th grader could still pick art classes and a music and the STEAM. So they can, it's not like they can't take music and a world language and STEAM. There's still more options within the schedule. When the consultant looked at our schedule, he saw that we were understaffed in the periods for the choice classes. And so our hands were kind of tied. We had enough staffing for some art choices, for some world language, and for some music. But we still had a lot of kids who didn't want any of those classes. And so by default, they were bumped into study halls. We talked to that, as Leslie said earlier, we talked to that demographic of kids, like, what would make you excited about school? And they want to do more things with like engineering and design and hands-on, and they want to be outside and they want to be active. And a lot of those kids were the kids who had our highest behavior referrals, our lowest academics, predominantly boys. So we listened to their voices and met with the teachers and tried to figure out like what would they be most interested in. But still, a student who's a band student who wants to do this will still have room in their schedule, especially in 8th grade.
If I am an orchestra, if I want to do orchestra and take a world language, can I do choir?
Yes.
Okay. In both 7th and 8th grade?
Yeah, in 7th grade, world language is required up until 7th grade.
Okay. How about in 8th grade? Where do I get conflicted in terms of the schedule?
If I'm an 8th grader, I can do band. I could do 2 musics, a world language, and STEAM, but I wouldn't have a study hall.
Okay. Good, thanks, it helps me.
Okay, thanks.
I need help with Fayed at Brooklyn and at Netherwood Knoll. That's just that's adding an FTE teacher to take because of increasing class loads.
That's correct. Several of the grades have 5 classes, and so Chris, 5 sections, excuse me. So Chris last year did the pilot where he added in additional PE and mindfulness as that 5th rotation for students to experience. And that was successful enough so that he would like to keep that for Netherwood, and Brooklyn would like to add it because they have 5 section grades at their school too.
Okay, and Prairie View?
They have 4 sections, so they're not in that boat yet.
Okay.
But if we see our numbers continue to grow, and we know we will, then we would be looking at that too.
Okay, so is the sections different for orchestra, music, and art at Brooklyn and Netherwood Knoll? We're providing scheduling relief for Fayed. What about the others?
Well, what that does is it takes the class sizes down in all of the other classes too. Because when there was 5 sections, they had to come up with creative scheduling, and the class sizes would be much larger because there weren't as many places to have students go. So with the addition of this particular option, the class sizes stay very reasonable.
The mental health in the first priority, what specifically was that for? Is that for the CBITS program that we heard about earlier, or is it different? What's involved in that?
No, it's different, and that's why I put the footnote, and I apologize,
Yeah.
it could be clearer, but to say we have budgeted for the CBIT screening at the high school,
Right.
so this is not part of that. So
And that
this-
was something that we were talking about mental health at the middle school in RCI area, right, Krista? Where did we had a budget issue where we couldn't fund some aspect of mental health.
It was CBITS at the high school.
Okay, that's
Yes.
now in the budget, it wasn't in.
Correct.
Okay.
It's
so-
not in the budget in terms of new dollars. We realigned staff so that we could do
Okay.
what we believed we could not do this school year.
That's right. Because we heard that when we had the mental health report, we heard we hadn't had it budgeted the last time. It's going to be budgeted for 18-19, right?
Yes,
Okay,
it's
so
a
what's the
reallocation.
mental health position on our watch list?
So in terms of, we are in the process of evaluating what exactly that would look like. We want to look at the youth survey data as well as the grant funding for a potential social work position and see if we have funding available for that, as well as a new grant with Title IV that's become available. So in terms of looking at more specifics, you'll see that in the second priority of when we prioritized at the team where those positions may be, but we want to take your feedback today. We're meeting as a team tomorrow to reflect on the meeting and the feedback, with our goal being to come up with a specific recommendation for the second meeting. But we at least wanted to let you know that it is one of our high priorities.
Okay, so if we don't, we're basically placeholding $85,000 there. Does that
Correct.
mean that we may think that the school psych or part of it, or the counselor positions, we would move some of those dollars into there? Is that what we're hearing?
Yes.
Okay. And we'll get that information. As soon as you guys kind of do that, we're going to need to know, because we got to vote on it.
Right. No,
So
we
know
understand.
some of the specifics. Okay.
We should have an update ready for the board at the end of this week.
Okay.
And that's why we scheduled tomorrow's A-team meeting, to gather your feedback and then to come back with one final report. So you can have it for a period of time before the April 23rd meeting. So if you have questions the night we would like you to make a decision, you can get them to us ahead of time and we can respond to them.
I'm going to table for the behavioral specialist. Number one, that would be, are you contemplating that that's one person? Or are we splitting up of the money for that across our buildings to have somebody in each building be a behavioral specialist?
We talked about it in terms of being one person, but not necessarily one building.
Okay.
It would be someone who could help in multiple buildings.
Tell me what that looks like. How does that work? We've had some conversation about relieving administrators from the day-to-day grind of dealing with behavioral issues that are taking away from other areas of leadership in terms of the building. Tell me how this addresses that.
I'm not sure yet if it would be one or if it could even be two if some of these other things were moved to 0.5. But the idea is that there would be a behavioral specialist who would work with teachers and work with teams to put behavior plans in place. Now, how much that would alleviate from principals, I'm not sure. But what we are certain of is that there is a need for people with this level of expertise to continue to work with teams of teachers as they're putting together behavior plans for students on their teams or in their classrooms.
Okay. The ESL coordinator then, tell me how that works. What's involved?
Well, this, as I mentioned earlier, was part of the report from CISA, where she mentioned that, we're doing a great job with the resources that we have, but there are a lot of plates spinning. And having somebody who was coordinating across all 6 buildings would be beneficial. I don't necessarily know at this time that it needs to be a full-time position. I just know it needs to be more than 0.2. Another additional benefit that I think it's important for us to think about is that with the teachers that we currently have, which are only 2 for the entire district, it's required that we test our English learners yearly to be able to obtain their access test scores so we can see how they're growing in their English proficiency. Well, because there are only 2 of them and every student needs to be tested, it takes away a considerable amount of instructional time during that testing window. So there's about a month and a half where the teachers are more focused on this required testing than the instructional piece. And so one of the things that the CISA consultant said is you need somebody to be able to take that off the plate of the teachers so they can be fully present in the instructional component without any breaks for testing. So that's just one piece that would be put on the plate of the coordinator. But in addition to that, I would like that person to have significant responsibilities related to professional learning for teachers on meeting the needs of English learners in their classrooms.
Steve and board members, just one addition. Another way to look, or another consideration in our positions under Table 4 is occasionally you give me feedback about make sure that we don't have too many silos. I'm sure everyone remembers that feedback that you occasionally give me on that. Some of these positions, in fact almost all of these positions, if we make them district-wide and we teach to that universal approach, because the universal approach is building capacity, making everyone's skill set stronger. On the behavior side, if we have a child that's particularly bright and challenging, we can send that district-wide behavior person to work with a team of teachers, raise their capacity, and then better serve that student. By raising the capacity of the classroom teacher to better serve that student likely does not end up in the principal's office. So it's really interconnected, and I listened to that comment that you make to me about silos, and this is a tool, technique, strategy to make sure that our universal K or pre-K 12 is similar. And you'll recall, some of you that are veterans, we never want to have the educational lottery where a particular school or a particular grade level is better at things than others. We're trying to make it universal, so the experience of first grade in Brooklyn or Netherwood or Prairie View has a similar experience for that young person. So that's a thrust with all of these positions. And I will yield to my 2 colleagues that have done a lot of work on this if I've overstated or understated that.
I think that's wonderful. I think the idea is ultimately that we develop our internal capacity so that as teams and as individuals, we're better able to meet some of the really significant needs that our students are facing. and thereby will eventually improve as far as the amount of time a principal has to spend on it. But that will be a goal we'll work toward. It certainly wouldn't be something that would happen right away. And the silos piece, it's something that we have been talking about as a coaching team. The importance of maintaining similar areas of focus, the importance of learning together, growing together, and sending common messages, and how the leading educators would sort of be folded into that team that's already existing and with structures that are existing to ensure that we all stay on the same page and have the same focus.
I guess one of the things I'd look for is how we look at the ESL program then globally and what that's going to look like if we have that. And a coordinator to me is, I'm not sure I like that word. I understand why it's there because I've always understood the leading educators to be more coaches. That's our terrific teachers at that upper level who bring their skills to other teachers and work directly in the classroom. So I'm getting that feel as we go through the conversation as opposed to what I initially read. I thought, a coordinator, we're just creating another position that we're going to have there forever, as opposed to a coaching component, which is what we really understood the lead educators to be. You know, those. So if you could give me an idea as to what ESL looks like. And I know Cindy's here, and the high school component's been really important. We're going to lose a really valuable resource to her with her leaving, and I think it's important for us to pick up that. I know Prairie View has got significant ESL, and Dawn spends a lot of time there too, and if this position could assist there to relieve some of that burden, I think that would help. I need some idea of what we've got in terms of literacy and math, in terms of coaches. If you can give me what we've got, that the literacy and math coordinators, where they fit in with the scheme of what we already have here. I don't have a full understanding of what we have in staffing there. Because I know forever we've been adding resources into literacy and math. So if you could get that, and then how these, I'm going to call them coaches or upper, work into that and what they play. And I really appreciate the silos stuff. Okay.
Yeah, we have a special GINA chart on coaches, so we can provide that to you, and you'll be able to see the distribution across schools and the number. And I will say there is a trend. We have a greater. There is a trend toward more instructional coaches as opposed to, I would say some of our reading coaches are really instructional coaches, although 8 to 10 years ago when Jane Peschel led us through all of this, we termed them literacy coaches, but really they're instructional coaches for all intensive purposes.
Yeah.
But
and
we'll
I
give
need
you
to
that
know,
chart.
I think the board needs to know how many coaches we have, where they're at, what they're doing, that sort of stuff. The tier 1 support through instructional coaching, that may be one person or more depending on stuff.
Correct.
More likely more in that area than the other 4, or? Okay. That was, if you had asked me a year and a half ago about the leaders, I would have thought they would all be grouped in there, that we would just have that. And so this is a new way of thinking that I'm processing in terms of looking at the coaches. I run out of notes, so sorry I took up so much time. Let's go back around now with board members. Any additional comments or questions? But first, Brian wants.
Yeah, Steve, could I just highlight something? I want the board to know that Gina and Andy have been working feverishly on our health insurance, and we've been able to make a reduction. I just want to point it out because it's such a large budget factor. We were at 5.5% or almost 6% on our first proposal. We're down to 3.95% with an eye on making that smaller. They're also negotiating with, when I say Al, I think most of you know what is Al's last name? Yeager, thank you. Al Yeager from Associated, he's been our insurance consultant that is the intermediary working with, well, at one time Dean, now all UW Health, there's a possibility that we could get another 3-year contract or perhaps even push it out a little farther. I think for those of you that have been around for a few years, you know the certainty that it brings to the not only our employees, but also to the district's budget part of it when we can lock in a long-term rate. So that's something I'd put an asterisk on, that you will hear more from Gina and Andy on that as we start to wrap things up.
And I'm assuming Al's looking not strictly at Unity, but other potential insurers?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know that we need to go more, but if we're looking that far out, okay. Let's go back around. Dan, anything further?
No, I just want to reiterate that I think that I would encourage the board to put our money where our mouth is. We made a very strong statement of policy about environmental concerns, including curricular concerns, and I don't know that I can support a plan that doesn't at least give some instructional oomph to that, more than what we've got now. And I know that we've got a lot of people working very concerned about that. Many teachers are very concerned about it. They were part of the task force, and we just need coordination throughout the schools and between curricula more than what we have.
Jeff?
I just want to say thank you for the fact that computer science is on the first priority list. Administrators know that that's something I've been pinging them about probably since my first day on the board, so thank you.
Yeah. Dan?
And I know this is one of the toughest things that I think about every year regarding the school board is how can we make education and the curriculum better for the kids through the staffing. And we only have so much money, and it's really tough job. So I'm not trying to attack you at all. It's just you guys know my priority, and that's what's important to me.
Courtney? Krista?
Just a couple clarification. The FIAD mindfulness for Brooklyn, that 60, I see we also had that in Netherwood, but it's not reflected here because it's already in the budget. Correct. And then Prairie View is depending on if the growth happens, that would be added. Okay. And then just a quick question too about the grant possibilities. Was that money for the social worker? And is there any other positions that you see having grant potential or money that would come out from outside the normal budget or from state resources?
So in terms of the safety officer, there is the grant program that's available through the new law that was passed on school safety. So that's a potential, and Andy and I have just started talking about that since he was in Thailand and then I was in Texas, and now we're finally back in together. So we will be looking at that as well and that grant potential, but we wouldn't know that. Yeah. That'll be something we have to request and they'll be approved.
Is there any potential for mental health grant funding under safety or anything that's coming from school safety that you've heard?
Part of the grant was to talk about trauma-based care. And so there might be some potential for that with a social work position. So we're learning about that now. They're working on the grant application process. And then I also mentioned we have Title IV that could be used for mental health funding as well, which is only about $10,000, but it's still something.
Krista, just to that point, we've been trying to lobby with John Forrester and a few others about having more access to this state money from the recent legislative session that's not all tied up into facilities, because some school, I want every school to have safe entrances and safe security, but we're ahead of that game, and our community and taxpayers have paid for it. And if we're ahead, I don't want us to be penalized, and I'd like to get, well, it would be great to have permanent funding, but we take some grant funding for some positions that would help us continue. That way it spreads money from Racine down to Superior across the entire state. So we will continue to lobby and work on that.
I'm looking forward to that summary of the Dane County Youth Survey. I think it'll make it easier for me to help understand what comes from those mental health needs to slide down into that priority one. So I'm looking forward to understanding where the what that survey says. Steve mentioned the coaching versus coordinating. In my world, coordinating it just feels like overhead to me, and I don't want it to be. Oh, it's not overhead. It's much more important than that, and so I don't know if coordinator is the right word. For me, it's not the right word.
Well, and I am open to suggestions on that. My goal was just to show that it's not an administrator position.
Yes.
Right? And we have coaches already, and these are a little bit different jobs, although similar. So, but doesn't mean we can't use that word too. So I am open if you have any brilliant.
It not only feels better to me, I think it's more descriptive of what we're actually asking for. And it reminds me that it's an educator role, not just a management role. It's someone who's in that role, who's very good at it, who's a leader in that role, and is helping others rise to that level. And with regards to Dan's comments about the environmental focus, it'd be a great opportunity to use that STEAM space at OMS. And it seems to me that there would be grant money available there for that kind of education.
Thanks, Tim. Barb?
I'm not exactly sure how to ask this, but because I'm still thinking about what it means. But the behavioral specialist, is the need for this something that's existed for a long time or a while, and we're finally able to find a way to fund it? Or are we seeing that there are more needs for teachers to be coached on dealing with behaviors?
Anybody want? That's a really good question. A really good question. In my role as a principal for many years, I saw that the need has always been there to have more expertise, even more expertise, because we have wonderful people now who know a lot and do great things. But to have even more expertise brought to the table when we're trying to work on a plan to meet the needs of students. However, I also know that sometimes those needs tend to spike, and they tend to spike at certain times and in certain areas. And I think we've been feeling a little bit of that. A little bit of an increase. And I think the data that we see with the Dane County Youth Survey will support that.
Okay, then I don't really expect an answer to what I'm going to say next, but I guess what is rolling around in my head is, so we're trying to help our teachers be more effective at dealing with these behaviors, but at some point, are we stepping back and looking at sort of school structure or curricular changes that can help deal with the behavior issues we're seeing?
Oh, absolutely. I understand completely what you're saying. I don't want to be able to think of the behavioral specialist as someone who's just creating a plan to deal with the symptoms, as opposed to what really might be part of our problem and how systemically we could address it better. So that's a great question, and I think that's part of the behavioral specialist being a part of the team related to instruction too, so that we all have a similar picture about where we're at and where we're going and how all of our talents can complement that direction. Because you're right, it's never just one thing, it's many things that need to be examined.
Thanks, Barb. Ellen, anything? Yeah. Troy? Great. Do you guys, was that helpful for administration stuff? Any questions for us, or you guys need some clarification of where our minds are at before we go ahead?
No, that was extremely helpful. I mean, we have spent a significant amount of time talking as a team, discussing it. Leslie and I have talked quite a bit about it, and we continue to refine our thinking, and your questions have really helped that. Also, I have the charts that Brian referenced earlier, and so I will share that with all of you as soon as we finish with this discussion so that you can take a look at it. But there's a lot of information behind these charts, so if you want additional information, please don't hesitate to give me a call or email me. I'm happy to talk about it more because I really want to make sure that you have all the decision you need because I know it's a really big decision.
Thank you. That was a really good discussion, everyone. Thanks and to the A-team for putting it together. And I personally kind of like the fact that we're thinking through it. We don't have like rigid in-place plans and it's flexible a little bit. So that was good. Board members, if between now and 2 weeks you have any questions about the staffing plan or information that we have, let Brian or me know so that we can get you some information or get you some answers to questions that you might have. So we do plan on voting on this in 2 weeks in terms of approving the staffing for the next budget. Okay? All right. That takes us to our next item on the agenda, which is work session on student population and growth. Brian, do you have any additional information you want to share with the board? Other than, if not, then we've kind of got a little exercise that we want to undertake.
Yeah, nothing additional to share with the board tonight. One item that Steve reminded me of, and I'll get that to you by the end of the week, is what would the classes look like, or what would the buildings look like by 2025 with our growth? We didn't have that last time, and I just need to close the loop with Erica on that, and I'll get that out to you this week.
Okay. So in talking with Brian, we'd like to see if there's any way we can narrow a little bit where we're at in terms of options, not eliminate them necessarily, but get some idea of where the board's at with respect to the 5 paths before us. And so I shot out some information or a question that we wanted you guys to process through tonight. And so that's coming around. So the question that we have is, we've been presented data with respect to growth projections, the school capacities and costs and flexibility, and with respect to school size and grade configuration. Given all this, are there options that are more or less viable at this point in your view? So do people need some time to process this? Are we ready to kind of jump in and talk about it individually? I think we sort of want to get some feedback from you as to where we're at in terms of the data we got and your view of the data, and whether that, in your view, makes some options more or less viable with it. And anybody have any thoughts about how to proceed? Anybody want to jump in? Krista.
I just have, it gives me pause about the certain plans that say they're less flexible into the future. So like a 1A where there's really no clear, I guess as we look at this, we have to set ourselves up for success, meaning if things don't grow as fast as we think they're going to do. And so I think some plans give us more flexibility to say, okay, we know we need to go X, but then it gives us flexibility after kind of the first iteration of growth.
Yeah, I'm with you, Krista, on that. I weigh flexibility in our choice very heavily, and which makes me want to go with 1B/4 because we don't know exactly what's going to happen. We know there's going to be growth. How much growth? Where is it going to be? The more flexibility, and regarding the cost analysis, that plan seems to be right in the middle regarding where we end up spending things. It's one of the least expensive to start out with, and then it jumps in, to be one of the more expensive later on. But that helps us to plan for the growth as well if we don't have all of our expenses up front. So that's where I'm coming down. If these are our choices, these 5, I would say I'm leaning towards 1B. In the end, I realize it could end up having us have 2 middle schools, which seems like some people don't like the idea of having 2 middle schools because people don't come together as the Oregon community until they get to high school at that point. But as Oregon grows, I don't think that's going to be something that we can avoid for all that much longer.
Can I make a suggestion that we just, for ease of discussion, talk about 1A for a second, which is different from all the other plans in that it suggests we build 2 schools right out of the gate. And, let's talk about that, because I would guess, at least my opinion is that may not be the best plan, and I would guess that there may be some consensus around that idea, in which case we could eliminate that and move on. That might be a good starting point.
Yeah, we can, I'll take this wherever you guys want to run it. That's okay, that's out on the table. What do people think about that?
I would agree. There's a little bit of a needle in a haystack, even with just only 5 options here. And if we can eliminate one easily, and I think the bet to go all in right out of the chute, especially considering the uncertainty about the economy over the next 3 or 4 years particularly, I just think it is betting the farm. We know we're going to get there anyway. I just don't want to build it and have nobody come.
And please feel free to jump in without me calling on you.
Okay.
Let's just have a discussion here and open. So, right now, the 1A is on the table. Any thoughts about that? Anybody have any additional thoughts on it?
I continue to have a concern about any of the options that have only 1 middle school, because I heard there are some real concerns about the ability of staff to keep tabs on students, to relate to students, and to be aware of where they're at. And I know that students like the idea of 1 middle school, but what I want to say about that is I think their experience of 1 middle school is going to change significantly when it's a whole lot bigger. So the advantage we have with 1 middle school and everybody coming together, I understand that, but that's based on a smaller number of students. And I think once we have many, many more students, the experience will not be the same.
As I was kind of getting a consensus of what the student says, and I think I said this last time I talked, the students are very used to what they have. They're used to coming together at 5th and 6th grade and being in middle school together and then coming to high school as a whole class. And I know at some point as we grow, it's inevitable to probably have another middle school and even at one point maybe another high school. So I think that looking forward, I know that it's a priority to students now to come together before high school, but you also have to think about that's what they're used to, and if having 2 middle schools was the way it was, and if you were able to still be able to keep tabs on the students better in smaller middle schools, meaning there's more than one, I think that might be more beneficial to the students than coming together before high school.
Yeah, we've got 2 things playing around. One is 1A and one's the size of the middle school.
Yeah, just my thoughts on those 2 points. I would agree that I think, in my opinion, 1A is kind of off the table for building 2 schools at the outset. And then I agree with Barb verbatim with her thoughts on the single large middle school.
Okay. Anybody have 1A on their keep list? I mean, with that? Okay, I think, Brian, building 2 schools under 1A in the short term is an option that's off the table. So you can cut a couple slides from the presentation, right? That's a good thing. Let's talk about the issue that distinguishes, I think, the rest of the plans, really, and that's the middle school issue and where people are at on that. If you look at 1B, that keeps 1, 7, and 8 building. In a long term, we would have to expand 5, 6, and then build a second middle school. Path 2 does the same thing down the line, whereas I think when we go to path 3, then we move to a 6-8 configuration. So 3 and 4 are really different ideations of changing grade configurations to 6-8, whereas 1B and 2 keep our current configuration. So where are people at relative to that distinction then? Where does that give us in terms of flexibility down the line? Dan?
Well, the 1B, from my understanding, is we wouldn't have to switch it to a 4. So if we look down the line in 3 or 4 years and say, we really like the configuration here, we can do a new RCI or intermediate school, and we'll still have the 4 levels of school. Or we could decide to go down to the 3 levels of school, what we used to call, grade school, junior high, senior high. Or, can keep calling them, I don't care what we call them. It's just a 3 level instead of a 4 level at that point. Some students do better moving more, some students do better moving less. I don't think we ever found anybody in our experts or the people that looked at this that really said one was better than the other. It's just that for some students they like to move and it helps them, and some students they would rather stay in a school longer. So the difference, and then also, I just am a person who likes to keep the options open. So if you go with the 1B, you can always switch to the 4 in the end, because the 1B has the same start as the 4. So then we've got 2 places we can end up, and I'm sure that if things radically change, we could even come up with a 3rd or a 4th option down the road. But at least we have 2 clear options. Go to 1B, and it also makes the change less sudden. We keep the 4 school structure for at least the next 3 or 4 years while people get ready for the idea of perhaps moving to a 3 school structure.
So really you're just saying under 1B, really the only thing that we're doing on 1B is building a new K-6 school, and that would be the same as Path 4. And
Except that 1B also suggests addition to the middle school,
yeah, okay.
where 4 I don't think does.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's in the short term, yeah.
Yeah, then that's just because we're not building a new building that we're going to need space there. Right. But why would that be? Why would we be building? The question I have is, if all we're doing in terms of 5, 6 levels, building a K-6, why in Path 4 don't we have adding on to OMS, because we're not going to be expanding that in the future? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't leave us the option to keep it as the single middle school.
got it. And so the decision between 1B and 4 in the short term is in 1B, you're committed to staying in the current grade configuration, whereas if we go 4, we're making the decision now that we're going to move to 6-8. Is that right?
I don't think that was my understanding, as 1B is convertible, because we're building a K6 instead of a K4.
But if I look at, by adding, under 1B, adding a gym station, remodeling the cafeteria, you're making the decision that you're going to keep that as a 7-8 and expand that building.
Right, to my
Down in the
understanding,
future.
that's a cost of having the option to either keep one middle school or convert it. So you'd have one middle school with an extra gym station then, in the end.
And are you comfortable, Dan, with, in the midterm from 24 to 30, having a really large middle school then at 7 and 8? Because that's what we would do. The flexibility that you're suggesting is maybe building a new middle school 2030 to 2040.
I think the new middle school would have to come in between 2024 and 2030 in either of these plans.
Anybody
So-
else want to weigh in?
Somewhere in between 2024 and 2030. Yeah, and so I would be willing to spend the extra to expand the middle school to keep our options open as to whether we want to go with the 1B in the end or convert.
Anybody else?
I would just reiterate what several people have already said, that having a really large middle school doesn't sound like a good idea to me. So I'm not ready to say let's eliminate 3 of these paths because they have only one middle school, but I think it's a serious con to a plan that has only one middle school.
How do other people feel on that point? I mean, that's a pivot point issue. Are you okay with having a really large middle school, which, the projections are 900 plus?
Yeah, I'm with Barb on, I think we need to get over the fact that we're going to have 2 middle schools and plan for that. I think as Alan mentioned, I think the middle school experience that people are trying to hang on to is in large part due to the size of the current middle school, and it will dissolve away as it gets bigger and bigger. And it's more challenging to handle administratively. So I'm in favor of moving towards the thought that we're going to have 2 middle schools as opposed to expanding the
And
middle
at
school.
6-8, do a 6-8?
Yes,
configure-
and move to a 6-8 configuration, because I heard clearly that at least I thought I heard clearly that the ability to establish longer term relationships, teacher-student relationships over a longer period of time is important as well, and changing every 2 years makes it difficult for that to occur.
Steve,
Courtney.
I think there was some discussion at the task force that the potential expansion at the middle school, the gym station and cafeteria seating was actually going to be needed in the short term. Am I remembering that wrong, Leslie? That there was some benefit to thinking about adding a gym station right now, that they're already a little crowded, or maybe I'm remembering that wrong.
What are the factors that weigh important for me are the size of the middle school. I don't want that to get any bigger than it is in terms of numbers there. I don't think practically we can make that school bigger to fit that site, even if we wanted to. I just think that would be problematic. We have problems with that site right now with the current student level. And if you put 200 more in there, I don't know how practically you do that physically. I mean, you can always squeeze more square footage onto it, but I don't know how it works functionally. So I have a concern that way. But I just think from a flexibility standpoint, we get more bang if we do a K6. That gives us a pause to see how fast the development happens. And it also gives us the flexibility in 2030 to decide what to do too. I just think it gives us more flexibility in the long run. The cost of that is exactly what Ellen articulated, and none of these are cost free. I just think, for me, I don't really want to see a middle school that big in this district.
So is the end result then that we would build a K6 and that children that attended the K6 would potentially have a different experience than the kids that are currently in our K4, 5, 6 setting?
I mean,
in our
that
existing schools?
if you view the universality of the experience as primary, that's a cost to it. To me, that's not a great a cost as the long-range implications of a large building at our current middle school site, as I factor those in. I also like the notion of moving RCI eventually to a K4 because we really didn't plan it that way. And so for me, that's sort of kind of consistent with long-range planning that we've had. So if you're balancing all these out, that's kind of where I'm at. The crux is, can we get bigger really practically at the middle school site? I don't think so. Do I want a middle school that large? I don't think so. But I recognize as the cost that means. It means moving to a 6-8. It means that students aren't going to necessarily come together until high school, but I think there's some programming things you can work on to minimize that impact and to integrate a little sooner in some aspects. So anyway, that's just where I'm at. Anybody else?
One of the reasons I'm comfortable with the K6 concept in the short term is because we heard Matt say that he felt there were things you could do architecturally to provide some kind of separation so that the kids were having a little bit of a different experience, more similar to the RCI kids in the K6 school.
Brian, did that help you guys? Erica, a little bit with that conversation? I mean, we've got feedback loop now. We're out talking to people and getting more feedback, and this was just to give you guys a temperature check as where the board is. The board's going to be getting more feedback as we go, and that might temper our view of things too, depending on that feedback. Krista?
I will say the K6 gives me pause. I think kind of the different experience that it's a K6 and we don't know for sure when it would be back to a K4. It gives me pause building a K6 first instead of a middle school first. I've heard people, and I went to the first focus group in terms of this Oregon experience and what we deliver in education, and no matter where you are in the district, it's the education that's similar that we deliver. I heard the anti-Fitchburg, and so I think we have to take all those things into account in terms of what is best, but it's a factor of what is sellable.
So where does that leave you in terms of plans that resolve that issue for you, Krista?
I like path 3 because we build a 6-8 first, which I understand that we're in crunch first with RCI. I think it gets us to K5, 6, 8, 9, 12, which addresses the 2 middle school, the 1 middle school, 2 middle school issue for me. I do like the concept of having K5 that's a longer experience, but it's every school's a K5. And so I just hear that people want to hang on to this Oregon experience, and I think it's kind of what Ellen said in terms of what kids are used to. And so we don't want to get too big, but we also want it to be similar and deliver it in, so everybody's going to a K-5, everybody's going to a 6-8, because I think it helps us curriculum-wise, and as we talk about not building silos, and, it's not scientific, it just what I've heard from people, what I've heard in the first focus group, what I know we believe, it feels the most comfortable to me, and the order feels better.
Okay, good, that's helpful. Anybody want to
So
react?
did any of these, in the end, I mean, when we're done, have different grade configurations? I didn't think that they did. They would all end up going to K-5, then 6-8, and then 9-12, instead of having some grade school just going to 4, or did I miss something? Well, right, but all of the schools are the same, though, through the grades. You don't, right.
In the end, yes.
Right.
Path 4 and the Krista's point is that Path 4 starts us out at a K-6, and she would prefer building a 6-8 rather than keeping the K-5 option alive. Right? Okay.
It's more for me about building 6-8.
Yep. And that
There might be a little more cost to Path 3 because I think a 6-8 school is probably more expensive, one, and two, there's a fair amount of addition renovation that has to happen at all the other buildings. Okay, I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
So we know.
Yep, that's a cost. And that the cost of 4 is you have different configurations at the K6 level, K5 or K4 level. The other one's a little bit more expensive, and it creates a 6-8. So, I mean, that's kind of helpful for us. That helped me a lot, Krista. I hadn't appreciated that until you had brought that up.
One thing that doesn't address, and I don't disagree with you, Krista, I think that's really a worthwhile thing to consider. One thing that it doesn't address is the fact that a lot of the growth is coming from the northern part of the district, so it doesn't really address that, and it kind of kicks the, not in Fitchburg thing down the road, and so when you get to the point in 2024 and you say, where are we going to build this elementary school, you just have the same issue then. So if that's, in my opinion, not really resolving that anti-northern part of the district thing.
And one of the things that will help, I think, is when we get those numbers for 2025 is to see how that's populated, where that populates from. And in the short term, where it populates. That might be one thing to look at when we try to distinguish between 3 and 4. So.
And I like Path 4 after that, and I'm not saying I will only support 3. I'm just saying that feels better to me at this point in time. But as we have more focus groups and educate people more, that could change.
Any more wisdom on these points? We've got time.
We appreciate you narrowing our list down a little bit. That will be helpful as we move forward with the focus groups.
Well, also the thought process too, and what we're looking for in terms of data when you go out to the focus groups. You now have a sense of some of the board pivot points and what we're thinking of, and what you hear might change us in our thinking too. And
Steve, what is the timeline on the feedback from the focus groups? How much longer will you be doing those, and when do we expect to get the feedback from
I'll turn
them?
that over to Brian and Erica for an answer to that question.
Right now?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, good. Okay, we're done with that session. Information items, school board election results, and that's you, Krista, right? You did the canvas today?
Yes, it was close, let me tell you. Both Steve and Troy ran unopposed, so after our official canvass with our reputable Oregon School District citizens of Jim Planner and Kim Griffin to help us count the votes, Steve won Area 1 with 3,424 votes, and Troy won the seat for Area 4, replacing Jeff with 3,334 votes. Welcome to the Oregon School Board.
And Troy, you'll sign your oath next meeting and take your seat here, and we'll have our organizational meeting then to elect our officers. Okay? Brian, that takes us to the superintendent's report.
I have a couple of things, and some will go faster than others. Steve asked me to provide Jeff with a short little recognition, and I also have a plaque for you from the WASB, so I'm sure I'm now in hot water based on the directions that you gave Janie, but you will forgive me over time. I won't pick a superhero for Jeff, but if I was to pick a superhero, I would pick a wise person. Jeff has been a wise superhero board member. I recall getting to know Jeff back in the summer of 2012. Remember that? Right after the failed February referendum, when we had an opportunity to work with School Perceptions and Bill Foster, and we spent what seemed like 6 months in the district office conference room coming up with a survey. And I really believe that survey was instrumental to our success in 2014. And Jeff was a leader as a new board member on that issue, as well as being very involved in our teacher compensation referendum. Jeff also led the Visioning Committee with their work on the Vision 2.0 conference, the Path Forward, the Apollo Project, and of course the recent work that you helped Steve and I and Dr. Rickabaugh on with the Five Levers book, which you are invited. You are welcome to come back on May 7th if you'd like. And
Yeah, you should.
so we have a beautiful plaque for you from the Wisconsin Association of School Boards, and Erica is going to grab a great picture of you and I and Steve. And since not everyone can read this, I'll read this loud. The Wisconsin Association of School Board presents to Jeff Raymond for your dedicated service to the Oregon School District 2012 through 2018. Congratulations. Okay, a couple of other items. Today, Leslie and a few principals and I had the opportunity to get back into our summer routine of interviewing teachers. And at times I have one of those roles that gets focused on lots of other items. But today it brought back to me the importance of our classroom teachers, and visiting with the 4 candidates that we had. They were just outstanding candidates. I hope our pool continues to be as strong, and it put a smile on my face because it reminded me of what we really spend our time on, making sure that our classrooms have the very best teacher. Another item, you'll recall the March for Lives event. On Sunday, March 25th, I stopped at the high school, and we had about 30 to 40 students and advisors that were part of that walk from Madison to Oregon to Evansville and then ultimately to Janesville. It was a spirited group of 30 to 40 students and advisors, and it was cold. That was a cold walk that day, and the wind was blowing, but their spirits were super high. Next, the school safety. A school safety item. I believe everyone gets access to school news, right? There was a special issue of school news that's devoted completely to keeping our students safe. If you haven't had an opportunity to read this, I highly recommend it. I've gone through it, and it's really nice when the School Board Association prepares a special issue, and this is one that's close to everyone's heart. We also completed our first round visits with local police departments and fire departments. All 3 municipalities are done, and Andy and Gina are going to lead sort of round 2 meetings with the Oregon PD and fire department on some safety plan updates. Also, I'm not sure if board members received a letter from Senator John Erpenbach, but if you didn't, I will share this week a copy of a letter that Senator Erpenbach sent to me talking about language and the grant funding, which Gina and I did a little work on before she headed off to the conference, and we will be back at this with Andy this week. Our focus group information, this was Courtney's question of a couple of minutes ago. We have we have 7 focus groups between now and May 12th, and our goal is, as we get feedback from our focus group participants on a weekly basis, Erica and I will provide you with an update of everything that we've heard from the focus group conversations. So we're looking forward to that. We're kicking it off. We've got a lot of competition this Thursday at 6 o'clock because it's supposed to be 65 degrees. And I have a feeling we might be slightly lonely by ourselves at Netherwood, but encourage your friends. We are doing this one without making telephone calls and inviting to see what the pulse is and what the reaction is. So far, we have about 6 individuals that have RSVP'd for Monday, April 16th. I heard the weather's going to be about 35 degrees that day, so maybe we'll get a super big turnout. I hope some of you have received these cards in the mail, or at least my area. I think I received it on Friday. Janie, you still have not received it? So now this is work from the communication committee. Both Erica, Kristen, Joe Donovan, and our group that's looking at communicating the message. Again, we're trying to make it super, super simple. And you notice the focus on the front is on our student enrollment growth. You all probably saw the convention, Wisconsin School News. I think Janie included it in an update. Somehow I got in the middle of this, but the article is really about the Oregon School District, and there's a number of quotes from Steve and me about moving forward with community trust. Oregon School District works closely with the community as it continues to grow. So that theme continues to be out there and one that we're living. Last 2 things. I have a copy of our spring and summer 2018 community education booklet, and if you look at one of the interesting things about, there are great programs, great opportunities for community members of all ages, and every time we publish a booklet, one of our students prepares the design and the cover, and you might recognize this student's name. It's Michael Raymond. So congratulations to Michael and the Raymond family. What a wonderful picture, and it makes us feel like spring. Michael must be incredibly bright to give us this feeling at a time when it's been super, super cold. So I will stop with that unless any of you have questions for me. Thank you.
That takes us to closing. G1, future agenda, you have that before you. That will be our reorganization meeting where we'll take the oath of office and then we'll elect officers at that time. In terms of action items, we're going to have the staffing plan, the 18-19, and the CISA contract, and then probably some more work on our student population and growth report, maybe some initial feedback from the focus groups, perhaps. Just generally how that's going. And then we're going to have a couple items on for a closed session, so plan on that afterwards. Does anybody have anything else that they want to add to the agenda? If you have anything, let me know, or Brian before then. That takes us to checkout, as is the custom. Jeff, you get to go last, okay, this time, but I'll start around the table. Ellen, anything to check out on? Okay. Barb? Tim? Krista? Nope. Courtney? Dan? I've got something, well, see, you all laugh because you know I like to talk a lot, right? And one of the things that we all know Jeff about is that Jeff always didn't talk a lot at board meetings, but when he talked, it was always wise and we always listened, right? So I'm going to model you, Jeff, okay? See how much I've learned from 6 years of being on the board. You've been a terrific board member. The district is in a better position because you've served, and yeah, I'll miss you.
See, now you got me emotional before I even started. The funny thing is Michael was pretty mortified about his name being in here because he's really not happy with the design. But speaking of Michael, he's graduating this year. And I'm not going to speak off the cuff because I'm not good at it, so I have a prepared statement here. Michael was in the Oregon School District ever since kindergarten. And as a parent, my wife and I got to know his teachers and his principals and his associate principals, as most parents do. And you quickly realize how fantastic these people are at their jobs. The fact that we have such top-notch educators is no secret. However, very few parents have the opportunity of interacting with the administrators in the district office. As a board member, I've had the pleasure of working with Mike, Erica, Candace, John, Gina, Andy, Leslie, Brian, and Janie. What I'd like the public to know is how dedicated, intelligent, gracious, and hardworking these people are, and that their commitment to the success of our students is unparalleled. It's been an honor to work with them. To my fellow board members, both past and present, you know this isn't an easy job. From where I sit, the challenging days outnumber the rewarding ones, yet you devote much of your free time to the cause of education. I thank you all for your service to the community, and I thank you for putting up with me for 6 years. I have to give special thanks to two board members, Courtney and Steve, who were on the board when I was first elected. I didn't know the first thing about the inner workings of a school district. They could have let me flounder, but instead they welcomed and supported me. You two showed me the ropes. I thank both of you for your patience and your kindness. So everybody in the room, thank you. I'm very proud to have been your colleague.
Thank you, Jeff. And as is tradition, you get to make the final motion.
I move to adjourn.
I second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned.